So for our next session, we have Kirk Hovenkotter, young, handsome Kirk Hovenkotter, who's amazing change maker. We're number one, so lucky to have the electeds that we have in this region, but we're also so lucky to have the level of advocacy, the sustained advocacy that we have. Other advocates that we have in the room that are doing incredible work, Brock and Cameron and Anna. Where's Anna? Anna's not here yet. So there is this ecosystem of really smart, really dedicated, really tireless advocacy and advocates in this region that can bring out folks to put pressure on our elected so that they're inspired, moved by the better angels of their nature, and are moved to respond to what the community's needs are. But also, I think, play a really important role in bringing new ideas and new ways of looking at things to the center of the conversation. And I think that's where Kirk really is an incredible groundbreaker and an incredible leader in this. And so he's going to tell us about something that is an entirely new way of thinking about how we spend our transportation dollars. And that aligns with the transportation justice work that Cameron is doing at Front and Center, that aligns with all of the things that Anna is doing in terms of bringing access to non-drivers, that aligns with all of the work that Brock is doing in SNOCO. And I think it's really only the start, right? This is a proof of concept. But is really brilliant in terms of thinking of what are the levers that we need to make to actually make change happen in a really fundamental way. So welcome, Kirk.
Thanks, Paulo. As Paulo shared, I'm Kirk Hovenkotter. I'm the Executive Director of Transportation Choices Coalition. It's just so exciting to be in this room again with people doing some of the most exciting work on transportation in our state. This is the room that gives me energy, that gives me excitement to be able to continue to do this work. So I want to thank Anat, I want to thank Paulo for having me back to share more about this and about our Megaproject for Safety initiative that I was fortunate enough to get to share with a lot of you last year. I'm going to give a background on it just to get folks who weren't here last year up to speed on it. But today, I want so much of this conversation to be sharing about the great partnership that the Tasker Center provided us over this last year to do a walk and talk in Spokane on Division Street, one of the great examples of these Main Street highways. And I also want to use this as a moment to talk about how you can keep and build momentum around an idea like this. We all know there's great ideas are a dime a dozen, but it's how you organize and how you put pressure on decision makers and bureaucracies to be able to get them done. And that's the conversation that I really want to have with Paulo and with you all in the room today. So I'm excited to dive into this. I'm going to share a little bit more about our Megaproject for Safety initiative and what we've been up to over the last year and the support that we've gotten from the Tasker Center and folks in the room here today. But if you don't know Transportation Choices Coalition, we're Washington State's nonprofit transit advocate. For 33 years, we've been a coalition of business, labor, transit agencies, transit riders, and elected leaders, all beating the drum for more investments in transit. But this is critical, safe walks to transit. Because everyone on their transit trip starts as a pedestrian and ends as a pedestrian. And your transit trip really starts once you leave the front door. We do work across the state. We do fight for more funding for transit in the state legislature, which is heated at this moment and why it's really exciting to have folks like Rep. Nance attend a conference like this. We also organize transit riders in communities across the state, but we're most known for running and winning ballot measure campaigns. We led the campaigns in 2016 and 2008 to expand light rail across the Puget Sound region, and we also helped lead the Seattle Transportation Levy campaign in 2014, which passed the largest levy in city history to fund our streets, trails, and transit. And there's so many partners in the room who helped make sure that was a win. And I think what's really critical, and no surprise to anyone in this room, is that we have a traffic safety crisis here in Washington State. In 2023, we had more people who were killed or seriously injured in our roadways than since 1990. And we know how to fix these roadways. We know how to address these challenges, and it's by building safe places to walk, safe places to cross, more crossings. And this is a room full of people who know what the infrastructure answers are to be able to make our communities safe and address the traffic safety crisis. And we also know where our most dangerous roadways are. Here in Washington State, those are our main street highways. These are roadways that are shared ownership between the state and the cities that they run through. And not only are they our busiest transit streets, but they're also our most dangerous roadways. And I think everyone in this room knows the Main Street Highway in their community. These are roads like Aurora that run through Seattle and Shoreline. It's Wheaton Way that runs through East Bremerton. It's Highway 2 that runs through Monroe. It's Division Street in Spokane. It's Pacific Avenue in Tacoma. These are these big, busy streets that were originally designed to connect communities. But as their communities grew up along these roadways with businesses and residences and apartments, they became the main streets for these communities. And we want to make sure these are main streets we can be proud of. And like I said, we know how to make these roadways safe. We know that by adding more frequent crossings with sidewalks, with signalized intersections, and bus lanes and median refuge islands, we can make them safe places to live on, places we can be proud of, and great places to catch transit. But we know that these Main Street highways are especially dangerous. 47% of people who are killed walking on a street occur on these occur on state-owned roadways. And you're twice as likely to be involved in a frequent fatal crash on one of these Main Street highways than other state roadways like a rural road or a freeway. And Main Street highways are not just something west of the mountains. These touch communities across our state. This map highlights in red where these Main Street highways are, these state-owned roadways that run through incorporated areas. And you can see it's towns small and large. It's Dayton, Washington in southeast Washington. It's Highway 101 through Port Angeles. It's Highway 2 through Monroe. And we also know that we have a fast-growing state, and we're upzoning along these roadways. Communities across the state are doing their comprehensive plans, deciding where they're going to put new housing for the next 20 years. And I can promise you, almost 100% of the properties along these roadways are going to be upzoned for new housing. And the ask that we have is, if we're going to add new housing here, how do we make the roads that this housing is going on places we can be proud of, places that are easy to walk and get to these destinations and get to these homes? And I think if you have been to some of these streets like Aurora or Pacific Avenue, you know that there's stretches of them that don't have sidewalks. They're not accessible. They're not the roads that we know they need to be the homes for so many more people in our state. But we know that our state can do big things when it puts its mind, money, and might to a problem. We have mega projects for floating bridges where we commit billions of dollars over decades to fix a problem. You can see this floating bridge right out this window here that connects our Fortune 1 company, Amazon, to our Fortune 2 company, Microsoft. We know that our state can do big things around freight. We have mega projects for freight. This is the Puget Sound Gateway Project, extending 509 and 167 to make it easier for freight to get to our airport and distribution hubs. This is another project that commits billions of dollars over decades to an issue. We want to bring that same approach to our Main Street highways in the Washington State and the traffic safety crisis that we have in Washington State. And this is something that not only are we highlighting, but has been highlighted by outlets like the Seattle Times. And it was highlighted by former WSDOT Secretary Roger Millar, who called on the legislature to fund $100 million every year into these roads that he lovingly called stroads, but I prefer to call Main Street highways. And so we answered Roger Millar's call. In the last legislative session, we called for $1.5 billion over 10 years into these roadways, or $150 million annually into these roadways, and to bring the approach that we bring to other mega projects to these dangerous and busy streets. And last year, we went to the Washington State Senate Transportation Commission, State Transportation Committee, presented on this idea. And last year, we were lucky to win $100 million committed towards these roadways in the 27 to 29 biennium. And it was a really exciting win. And this went from an idea at the beginning of session to something that had $100 million committed to it. And we know we're not the only community across the country that is addressing these roadways. We see streets like 82nd Avenue in Portland, where the city of Portland has taken on that roadway, built on new median islands, built on new transit connections to make it a safe place to catch the bus and place to live. We see streets like Colfax in Denver, the busiest transit street in the state of Colorado, that they are building a new bus rapid transit line on, reducing the roadway width, and making it an easier place to walk and catch transit. And we need to do the same thing here on Washington State streets. And we were thrilled to be able to be supported by the Taskar Center to highlight one street in our state where a lot of these interests are coming together and can be a model for how we can make Main Street highways safer in Washington. And that is Division Street in Spokane. Quick show of hands. Was anyone who was in the room able to join us on that walk and talk last July on a hot, sweaty, busy day in Spokane that was right around the Washington State Traffic Safety Summit? All right, we've got Barb, we've got Brock. This walk and talk was funded and inspired by the Taskar Center and supported by their funding for us to raise awareness about the Megaproject for safety, but also to call attention to the power of the sidewalk mapping data that the Taskar Center has to identify where are the most important places to invest in these Main Street highways across our state. So we got out over 75 people to go on a walk with us. And as you can see from this photo, we had the illustrious Barb Chamberlain there speaking to this audience about all of the initiatives that are coming to Division Street that really can be a model for these investments. You have the Spokane Transit Authority investing in the Division Bus Rapid Transit Corridor. You have the State Department of Transportation, which is looking to revamp the Ruby and Division Street couplets to make them safe places for people to walk. And you have the City of Spokane that is ready to invest dollars in more crossings on this stretch of roadway. You have a huge alignment of people who see this Main Street highway as the new Main Street for the community just north of downtown Spokane. And it really is a model for the rest of the state and a model for this program and the money that we want to win for it. So I'm going to show a quick video of that walk and talk that gives you a sense of the conversations that were happening and just the energy of that day. So give me just 1 second to get this up, and I apologize because you'll hear a lot of my same talking points. But Division Street is one of Washington State's Main Street highways. These are roads that are owned and operated by our State Department of Transportation. They're also some of the most dangerous roadways in our state.
These are places where people are accessing their essential needs. They're getting to see their family members, they're going to the doctor, they're getting their groceries, and people are doing this not just by car, but also walking, rolling, biking, accessing transit. We need to be investing in making that experience safer, more reliable for people who are not just in a car.
Ready to walk in 85-degree heat on a noisy, loud road during rush hour. Let's go.
An issue we have, a big issue we have in Washington State and really around the country, is that the state highway system has developed over decades. And over those decades, the population's grown, the economy's changed, and the purpose for those highways may not be what it was at the beginning.
I think it's important for the state to make streets safer through investments like the Megaproject for Safety, because these Main Street highways, like Division Street in Spokane, like Pacific Avenue in Tacoma, like Aurora in Seattle, and like so many other streets across the state, are the hearts of a lot of our communities.
47% of people who are killed walking in our state occur on state-owned roadways, and you're twice as likely to be hurt or injured on one of these roadways compared to a freeway or a rural road.
Making sure that we have the safe streets, the bus stops, the transit. I want to be a part of a community that makes sure people get where they're going in the safest manner as possible.
People being able to know that cars are traveling at a speed that they could stop if you are needing to cross as a pedestrian or a bicyclist. I think all of it just creates a bigger sense of community and safety, and I really hope everybody gets to experience that.
Communities across Washington state are facing a traffic safety crisis. We know that we've had more people who are killed or seriously injured on our streets in 2023 than we've ever had. Every one of those is a tragedy. But we know how to fix these roadways. We know that if we can build sidewalks, more frequent crosswalks, median refuge islands, and better bus stops, we can make these streets work better for transit riders and also make safe walks to transit for those who take the bus there every single day. Transportation Choices Coalition called for $1.5 billion over 10 years to invest in these roadways. In this last legislative session, we were successful at winning $100 million in investments in these roadways. But we know that's just a drop in the bucket of what we need. We're going to continue to push for expanded investment in these roadways and make sure that we're dedicating the amount of money and resources and focus that we deliver to our other major priorities in this state.
Thanks for listening to the repetition and your time watching that glossy video. But I really want to highlight, thank Barb Chamberlain for speaking at that walk and talk in Spokane. I want to thank Anat and the Tasker Center for making that walk and talk happen. Before we get into the Kirk and Paulo show, though, I want to touch base on what we've been up to this legislative session and what we have coming up this summer, because this is an idea, but it continues to need momentum to be able to win more funding in an incredibly competitive funding environment in the Washington State Legislature. I think if you've been following the news, there's so many conversations about maintenance and preservation and the needs for funds to be able to maintain our bridges and roadways. But we know that we can't just maintain and preserve our bridges and roads as is. We know that our transportation system isn't working for the people of this state. It's too dangerous, it's not accessible, and it doesn't encourage you to take transit. And so our continued ask is to make sure that those preservation and maintenance dollars support complete streets priorities and make sure that those investments continue to build out safe places for people to walk and bike. In the legislature, we're also pushing for a proviso to encourage WashDOT to be able to come up with a plan for this megaproject for safety, to be able to design what this will look like. And we're excited to do that in partnership with the Washington State Department of Transportation and Barb and her team to develop what that plan looks like if that proviso goes through. We also are working with local advocates to do more walk and talks like we did in Spokane. We've been thrilled to work with the Aurora Reimagined Coalition to start planning a walk and talk along Aurora to be able to highlight the closest Main Street highway to where we are here today and highlight the great advocacy that the Aurora Reimagined Coalition has been doing on that roadway, and also to highlight the work that the Seattle Department of Transportation is doing to revamp that roadway. And so if you can, please follow along with our work at Transportation Choices Coalition to learn more about when that walk and talk is going to occur. It'll be later in the summer. You can learn more about how you can get involved in this advocacy and voice your support for investments in Main Street highways. This work is going to take continued advocacy and pressure, and the Tasker Center is one of the key organizations that is defining why we need to do this, where the gaps are, and we can't really direct the investments that we win without the data and the influence of the Tasker Center. So I want to thank Anat for having me here today. I want to thank Paulo for having me come back up here. And I'm really excited to have a conversation with you all about how we build on the momentum of initiatives like this, how we continue them forward. So thank you so much for your time.
Awesome, as always. Thank you, Kirk. So I think this is remarkable work, but it's just the beginning, right? And the sort of the two big questions that the observation that I have of what's so fundamental about this work is that it says that the lived experience that we all have that of walking down a sidewalk, using a wheelchair, crossing the road to get to the other side so that you can take the bus on the way back, deserves the same attention and the same expectation that we give to Megaproject like this, right? So if you look out the window here, that floating bridge is a freaking engineering marvel. It's the most incredible thing, right? The amount of ingenuity. It has these enormous, like, hooks that hook into the bottom of the lake with cables that hold it up. It's mind-blowing what it does, right? And we deserve the same kind of innovation and ingenuity and investment in the streets that we walk on every day, in the streets where we live, in the places where we wait for the bus, in the places where people ride their bikes, where kids walk, where people who don't have a car, who can't drive a car, who don't want to drive a car, live their lives, right? So we because of a lot of different reasons, it's been a lot easier to make these generational investments in things like this than it has been on the main streets. And yet, we know that the main streets are where we're failing, right? We're killing people in these streets. And it's because of this fundamental mismatch of what that street was designed to do and the way that it functions. It was designed to move lots of cars fast. And the way that it functions, like the video says, it's the heart of these communities. It's where people go to the doctor. It's where people take transit. It's where people go for meals. It's where you go to do your shopping. And many of those people are people that happen not to drive. And yet that street was designed to move lots of cars fast. It's essentially a highway on the surface, right? It's this huge mismatch of the way that it was intended to work and the way that it works now. So my big question for you, Kirk, is this is just the beginning, and we need to maintain our credibility in what we deliver, right? Because we're making a big deal. Give me how much money? 110 million?
150?
Give me $150 million, and we're going to make this transformational change that A, people are going to see, and B, people are going to recognize as better than what we have today. And if we screw that up and we say, oh, well, give me $150 million and it's a little bit better, then we won't be able to ask for the much bigger money. So how do we make sure that the delivery delivers?
Yeah, and I think it is being clear about what we want and the vision that we want for these roadways. That's a big piece of what the proviso that we're pushing in the Senate transportation budget will ask WashDOT to define what these roadways should look like, what this funding should go to. And we're not just looking to say what this $100 million tranche should be. It's when we continue to win hundreds and millions of more dollars for these roadways, what should these investments look like? So it doesn't just get peanut buttered across the state. And one flag that I have for this is I was lucky to be asked by Ann Goodchild, who is the professor of civil engineering here at the University of Washington, to help her design a class and seminar last fall that looked at these Main Street highways, that got her graduate civil engineering students to come up with plans of how do you make, they were looking at the stretch of Aurora from 125th to 145th. How do you make this safe? And so these students really got to dig into this. But we were also fortunate to have Chris Overlease, who is the head of KBA Consulting, who had previously led the redesign of Aurora in Shoreline. Has anyone in the room been up to Aurora in Shoreline? Do you notice anything different about that stretch of Aurora compared to Seattle's Aurora? Does anyone want to shout out anything? What do you notice?
Pretty plants.
Pretty plants. Anything else? No telephone poles, correct. Any others?
Lighter sidewalks.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Pedestrian bridges. It is a more comfortable place to walk. It's not, you know, the most beautiful boulevard in the world. It's not a Parisian boulevard, but it is safer. It's more comfortable. It's a place where you see development and housing and people living there. And when you talk to Chris Overlease, that roadway was designed in the early 2000s, and she got to design the first stretch of it. And she'll tell the story about she had the political support from the Shoreline City Council in the early 2000s to do a really bold investment on that corridor. And they had commitments to do 2 other phases along Aurora to be able to build out those medians, those street trees, those sidewalks. And after they did that first construction of that first segment, they got so much blowback, so much anger from local businesses, and the council switched over. New council members came in with other priorities that didn't allow her to go as boldly as they went on that first segment. So I think learning from that lesson and how you maintain the really strong investments is realizing you need elected champions, you need a strong vision of what your minimum requirements are for this roadway, and you need organized advocacy who's able to come up and say why this is important, because we're going to have businesses saying that the construction of these roadways is hurting their business. We're going to have neighbors complaining about the noise, but we know that the outcomes from these projects are critical. So we're thrilled to be able to see groups like Aurora Reimagined Coalition who are really doing the hard work of organizing around this roadway. So as Seattle looks to do the same thing on their segment of Aurora, we have the audience and organized members who are ready to go to the city council and say, no, we know this is going to be hard, but we want this.
Part of the construction, the concept of calling it a mega project addresses that idea head on, right? That it takes an amazing amount of continuous effort over the course of a time scale that spans elections, that span, you know, the Claudia Balducci was just here, and she was saying that, well, for the last 30 years, she's been an advocate for sound transit. So there's ways in which these mega projects are designed so that you set a direction and they kind of create their own weather, and they persist because it takes so long to make something that is significant, right? So this example where Shoreline did this incredible thing and then they sort of lost their way. And for folks that aren't from the Seattle area, it's actually, you know, it's an amazing thing. You cross from Seattle into Shoreline, it's the same road, and it feels like a totally different place. It's transformed, right? And yet, Kirk, how do we use the structures of the mega project to make sure that these things persist beyond our short attention spans, and also last the backlash, can survive the backlash that we will likely get? You know, because no good deed goes unpunished. Whenever you do something good, then somebody will come out with their pitchforks and say, stop all that. So part of the thing that you're doing is you're shedding light so that we know that the scale of the effort in terms of the funding that we need is what it is, that we deserve the kind of ingenuity and innovation and investment that we have in terms of, you know, similar to what we built in this beautiful bridge, but we need to have the continued attention over the time horizon that it takes to actually deliver these projects. How do we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question, and I think you see the mega projects are really their own programs of funding, and it has a project like 520 or Puget Sound Gateway or the North-South Freeway in Spokane. These are projects that were designed in the second Clinton administration and the first Bush administration, and they've continued on while our state's priorities have changed. And largely that's because of their structure, and they've built their own political support around them. And I think for something like the Mega Project for Safety, investing in these roadways, we need to build a broad coalition of people saying, we want to work on this, and we will say yes to these projects. So I think that means building a coalition not just of advocates and neighbors who want these projects, but making the case to, I'll say, our large engineering firms who want to design and build big projects, to our labor partners who want to put Washingtonians to work and look at these bridge projects and they see jobs. And so we need to tell the story of fixing Aurora is a huge project that is going to put so many Washingtonians to work in the building trades, in our friends at IBEW, and we need to make that case. So we have not just transportation and accessibility advocates calling for these improvements, but we have other more powerful partners in the legislature saying, no, we want these projects. We want you to put more money into these projects.
And is Cy around? I think because we could probably take some questions, and while you're doing that, Cy, I'll sort of.
Yeah. And I think one last plug, and then I want to hear from you all. I think Paulo's point about having this really this influx of funds into one stretch of roadway to show a difference is so important to those conversations. That if people can't see the difference from before and after of when you put in this money, you're not going to have that same imagination and public support. People know what it was like before and after the 520 bridge was built. People know what it was like before light rail was built, to use another, not a state mega project, but a transformative investment. And we need to show how these can be transformative and make sure we're not just spreading these investments across the state that our decision makers and the advocates can't see.
Laura?
Yes, so I am concerned with kind of a lack of acknowledgement, especially related to the first speaker we had today, about what happens when you cross the border into shoreline. The expectation, the way that people are policed differently, the way the small businesses rents change, and a lot of businesses that have been pushed out of, Ballard or U District or other places have found a home along Aurora. And I feel like unlike other parts of the city that have kind of their advocacy community around anti-gentrification, there isn't really an organized group in Aurora. It's been very clean this up, and there's certain populations of folks that have, sex workers and other folks that this has been their community for decades, and I'm just curious if you're facing those tensions in this work.
Yeah, I mean, displacement is real, and with any road rebuild project, it's investment that puts pressure on land values. I mean, we see developers will chase projects where you see these investments. And so I think it is critical of how do you make sure that we're separating the investments, but also protecting against displacement. And I think we've seen great models, as you mentioned, of how streets can do that. I'd love for this not just to be a neighborhood by neighborhood conversation, but how is the state stepping up? Because it has the resources and it has mitigation dollars that they use on projects like the Highway 99 tunnel to support businesses and to support community groups during construction. How do we bring the same approach that we brought to mitigation on, say, the Highway 99 tunnel to projects like these? So we're really meeting the need of investing in these communities, not displacing. But it's a really, really difficult question.
It's a difficult question, but I think that we need to hold our own feet to the fire in this and say that a dangerous road is not an anti-gentrification strategy. Cannot be. Right? That poor people deserve gold plate infrastructure just like people that are driving across this incredible bridge, right? And that we need to figure out solutions for affordability, for people to reap the benefits of the investments that we're making in those communities, but we cannot accept that the reason why we're not investing in this particular neighborhood and we're letting black, brown, low-income folks be exposed at much higher rates to dying in traffic because we don't want to gentrify those neighborhoods. That's not an excuse.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Kirk about roundabouts. I'm very much in favor of roundabouts because what I've read is that they can reduce the number of injuries and deaths from traffic by around 70 to 80% compared to traffic lights or other traffic controls. And I think here in Washington State, we have an okay number of roundabouts from what I've seen just personally, but I'm just wondering if you're working on roundabouts and trying to increase that, the number of roundabouts at all. Is that a focus at all?
It's not, and I defer to more of the experts in this room about safety and roundabouts and accessibility, which I know is a real concern. Our message, I think, on the Megaproject for Safety and these roadways is just more crossings. I think if you walk along these roadways today, even on the stretches that do have sidewalks, you're walking half a mile, 3/4 of a mile to a safe crossing, which encourages so many people to jaywalk. Or if you don't have the ability to jaywalk, you just have no chance to be able to get to what's on the other side of the street. And so I think for us, it's saying that we need more signalized crossings. We need more safe crossings of these roadways because people are going to cross no matter what. And we can legalize jaywalking in this state, which we should because enforcement falls disproportionately on Black and brown residents of this state. But we also need to create safe crossings. Like, even if jaywalking is legalized, we need safer places for people to cross in the places where they are. And we see that every day on these roadways.
Rock? Yeah, first, I think this is a brilliant campaign in terms of messaging and be able to mobilize people and capture decision makers and to think this is a great idea. And I think this is ultimately going to be a successful campaign, which is fantastic. I want to go back to what Paulo asked you a question, and I kind of want to pose it as a challenge. Back in 2014, when the city of Seattle was adopting its bike master plan, they did an estimate for building out the entire bike master plan. It was something like $350 to $550 million of how much it would cost. So I looked at that and I was like, this is half of $1 billion mega project. Why aren't we packaging this as one project? And why aren't communities planning their infrastructure this way? If they're willing to go for $1 billion project for one thing, why shouldn't we be able to do it for bikes and peds? And so Paulo's question was, how do we hold people's feet, how do we hold engineering firms, agencies' feet to the fire to be able to realize this vision and be able to hold it together? And, when I was thinking of this is like we need to get cities to package their projects and be able to apply for regional mobility grants or for other funding sources or go to get congressionally directed funding to be able to do it. But this is a new revenue source, and potentially you could have many smaller mega projects that you're trying to fund, and you could operationalize it to package the program to hold each project accountable. So I'm curious, have you given thought to it? And yeah, what's your perspective of making sure that these projects kind of are bigger and can be delivered that way?
Yeah, great question. I'll jump in and I'll let Paulo chime in, but I think there's a bunch of folks in the audience who can help answer that as well. I think we need to stop asking for crumbs on the table. I think we need to stop asking for the crumbs for walking, biking, and accessible investments from the main meal of roadway investment. And the things we're asking for are the right investments, and we need to ask for what they really deserve in terms of funding. And I do think we should be packaging more accessible network projects into bigger things to get our engineering firm and labor firm partners excited about building those projects. And I think when you package them together, they're just simpler for people to understand, and it makes it easier for legislators to say, I want to buy that. I also think on the focus on the mega project for safety, our focus has been on the state and on these roadways because the state controls these roadways between the fog lines. And we want the state to take responsibility for these roadways, and we know that the state has the funds to be able to make the change that we want to see. And take, for instance, the state Main Street highway that runs through Battleground, Washington. Battleground, Washington doesn't have the staff or the planners to be able to redesign and engineer and manage the contracts on this. How do we build up the flywheel in our State Department of Transportation to start fixing up these types of roadways? And then Paulo and...
No, go ahead.
I have a question in the same vein as Brock's. So you're talking about redesigning roadways, and when you're thinking about that, there's so many different things that you could want in terms of redesigning a roadway. And my question is, how do you, politically speaking, how do you stop and say, this is enough, this is what we're going to shoot for, so you can have continuity in your requests? Because, you know, I feel like it can get dangerous if you're asking for a new thing every time you approach the people in power. So I ask, how important do you see continuity of your messaging, and how do you try to manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you always need the long-range vision, and nothing in the legislature happens quickly. And so how do you keep going with the vision of, say, this $1.5 billion over 10 years? It's the thing that we still want and we want to be able to get to. But you know, in each legislative session, there's going to be fights, and there's going to be the tactical things you need to do to be able to move the needle a little bit farther to be able to get to that goal. So I think you're right. You need to have a very consistent thing that will make you happy. And you need to tell legislators, this will make me happy if you do this investment. And you don't want to keep moving the goalposts on.
Himanshu, give the microphone to Barb.
Yeah.
No, Barb,
Barb's excited.
Come on, Barb.
Excited, so.
Let it fly, Barb. Come on. Come on, Barb.
I want the punchline. Let him go.
All right.
No, Barb, go. Let's make this a discussion. Come on.
Okay. I got love in this room earlier, and so I'm about to rain on my own parade, I think. A few things about this. One is, this is not new money. This is not new money. And Kirk, I appreciate that advocates always have to say we had a win. And so it's a win for saying these dollars used for this purpose. It is within the preservation budget where we're supposed to be doing complete streets work. So it's money on specific projects, not on other projects. So the real win would be new additive funding. Additive is the key word here. And it would be in the safety program. The preservation program is the same one dealing with a bridge that has to be closed, with a highway that fell down a mountain in North Central region. You may have read about that. When we have to close Snoqualmie Pass for something, preservation is doing a lot of work. And we want these transformational projects. We need new money to do transformative work, because you still want us to do the basic work. Nobody gets across the river if the bridge is closed. No mode moves. So ask for new money. When you are asking, I'm a state employee, I am not asking for money. That's not within my job description. The other thing I think you could take away is that Celeste Gelman on my team coined just the perfect phrase here. Wide and fast, those are functions of roadway design and operational decisions. WashDOT does not operate all the roads we're talking about here. Seattle DOT is operating Aurora. So wide and fast is a roadway decision. Busy and complex, those are land use decisions. That is your city council or your county council. What is the zoning? What is the anti-displacement housing policy? What are they going to do at the city level or the county level that means that the uses alongside the road and the design of the road work together? Because they don't today. I mean, this is definitely not disputing the core premise, which is we have a lot of car sewers. And they need to be better, but just work all of the policy here, not only the transportation policy and not only the state. I think that's my big takeaway.
Agreed. Yeah. So last one.
Yeah, sure. Is this thing on? Just continuing on the conversation of messaging, you know, as you were talking about solutions, I heard you talk about medians, crossings, bus stops. A lot of those in a way, are traffic calming measures. I didn't hear you use the word traffic calming, and I was just wondering, is that intentional to kind of build these larger coalitions for like drivers that are afraid that there's going to be less capacity, that they're not going to be able to move as fast? Is that intentional, or is that something you're thinking about the type of language you're using as you're advocating for these things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I always try and use the thing that be as detailed as possible and use the thing people are familiar with. I think if you go to most of our grandparents and say, like, I want to invest in traffic calming, they won't know what that is. But my grandparents will know what sidewalks are. They'll know what more crosswalks are. They'll know what narrower lanes. Median refuge island, not that great, but yeah, like, I think that's why I try and use that language. And you can call it traffic calming, but if I'm going to go up to someone on the street, a voter, and say, like, do you want more sidewalks and crosswalks? They'll probably say yes. If I say, do you want more traffic calming? They'll be like, what? Yeah, so.
All right, last question in the back.
I love the idea of transformative change. I agree with Barbara on the funding. I also, a yes and kind of thing, like an improv. I work for King County Metro. My name's Jen Mayer, and we are trying to be scrappy and opportunistic with a lot of our programs. We don't own a lot of the sidewalks. One of the things that would be super helpful in a lot of these things is getting more tools and partnerships for interagency agreements. Quick example, SR 900, it took me, when WashDOT had a plan to build sidewalks along that corridor, it still has that plan, unfunded. We saw that they went in for a PSRAC grant. In 2019, I put aside $500K for, well, I didn't personally, but our CIP did, put aside $500K to build sidewalks. It took us 2 years to negotiate an interagency agreement and another year to build it, but we got 500 feet of sidewalk built. It would be way cheaper if we had models, because like the city of Seattle has a great project resource where you can see, oh, City Light's doing something here, or all the different agencies are doing all sorts of stuff. Anytime you dig dirt, I would like to have a model where we have a sidewalk SWAT team that says, oh, by the way, I saw you're having a truck lay some ground here. Can you build some sidewalk along the side? Can you do ramps? Can we be more opportunistic in our partnerships? Because a lot of us, it's a lot of money to mobilize for sidewalks and ramps and crosswalks, but if somebody's already mobilizing in that area, it's way cheap to give them a little more money to do the work that we want to see to get done. So I'd love to see, I love this partnership we're making on data and stuff. I'd love to have more partnerships on the smaller scale as well as on the bigger scale.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's what that Spokane Walk and Talk that Barb was on really highlighted, where it's the multiple different agencies all working together on one project. And it's hard. You sometimes come to loggerheads and disagreements, but it's how you work through them together.
All right, everybody, let's give Kirk a hand of applause here. Thank you. Well done. So lunch is ready. And also, Cameron from Front and Center was kind enough to bring the Transportation Justice board game that Front and Center has developed. And so, Cameron, are you going to be helping people play the game during lunch? So if you're interested in playing, find Cameron. And any other announcements before we let people go? Right. So after lunch, there's two activities, I guess, right? If you can stay here and play the game, or you can go on the walkabout, right?
Stay here and do office hours with Amy. Raise your hand. Or you can choose to come out on walkabouts with us.
Perfect. Amy, do you want to do a plug for the office hours? Yeah, come on down, just so that people know what the offerings are.
All right, so the office hours are just sort of, we'll gather and we'll look at the way that we contribute to OpenStreetMap and our data set. So it'll just be like a little mapping example space. We're going to focus on a project in Tacoma, and yeah, that's it.
All right, thanks everybody. Enjoyed lunch. Oh,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Thank you, guys.